Awesome. And then the one thing I would like for us to do is to just settle into our seats before we start and allowing ourselves to land. And you don't need to close your eyes for this. You can keep them open. I like to just go inward and feel my heartbeat and connect to that heartbeat, allowing you to land. And as you're inhaling, I want you to imagine that your heart grows outside of your body. And when you exhale, I want your heart to start softening. So inhale, it grows. And exhale, your whole body now starts to soften. And just keep that rhythm. And when you notice that nice little shift, flip your eyes open in the present and in the now.
Still can't sit still.
I know it's okay. You don't need to sit still. You can move around and shake that energy. It allows us to just kind of ground and get here and be here. So today we have Elicia, who's going to be presenting to us on a very important topic that I think that many of us would have wanted when we were younger, right? I mean, just so much to talk about. So I am going to go ahead and give you the floor, my darling. Let me just pin you. Okay. And
Okay.
go ahead. Introduce yourself and let us know who you be.
All right. Hi, ladies. My name is Elicia Ybarra, and you'll see a little bit more about me when I start the slide, but I teach women's self-defense. And so, trigger warning, we do talk about things like sexual violence, sexual assault. I have a lot of statistics. It may feel a bit overwhelming as I go through everything. So if you need to take a moment, just take your moment. I believe this is all recorded and can be resent. So you don't need to try to write everything down right now. And I can always send you anything that you might need or any questions you have. Since it's a small group, I'm going to try to make it a little bit more interactive, and I'll ask questions and we can all just kind of keep it more as a conversation and less of me just lecturing the whole time because that's not fun. Um, Bigger groups, I do have to do a little bit more of the lecturing because we get off topic and I get distracted easily. So I will go ahead and start sharing. And let me see, I have multiple screens. Give me 1 second. Let me get this on present. There we go. And then let me share screen one. There we go. Let me put you guys like right here. I think that's going to work. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So that's me in my uniform, and that's my second degree black belt. Today we're going to be talking about boundaries, instinct, and presence, and how that can help you stay safe. It actually goes in a lot with some of Akari's work about the nervous system. I just, up until this point, didn't quite realize how much understanding your nervous system is needed for self-defense. So I'm still learning on that part. But here's a little bit about me. My goal is to empower 1 million women to learn women's self-defense. I am the owner and founder of Pretty Hands, Hard Punches, and I've been training in martial arts for more than 30 years. You can see on the screen just a few of my lifelong career up at the top. That's little baby Ely. I was 6 years old when I started. So I've been actually 31 years this year. I hold a fourth Dan black belt in Taekwondo, a first Dan black belt in Hapkido, and along with all of the accolades and winning the trophies and the competitions, I am a domestic abuse survivor where at a time in my 20s, I had to use the very tools I teach in my course to help myself save my own life against my abuser when I tried to break up with him. And I did not leave quietly. I left very loudly, and he decided to end my life instead of allowing me to leave. And now I am a fierce advocate for all survivors. And I'm trying to help more women recognize those abusive flags and red flag behavior before it ever gets physical. I'm an empowerment speaker and a self defense expert, and I am currently studying criminology and psychology. As a matter of fact, today I just applied for the criminology master's degree at the University of California, Irvine, literally today. So snaps for me. I'm slightly nervous. I don't know if I'm going to get in, but it was worth it. Does anyone have any questions so far about me? Nope. Okay. So one of my best quotes that I came up with when I first started this is that boundaries are your best form of self-defense, and it's for your heart, your mind, and your soul. And in business, boundaries are how you protect your time, your peace, and your power. And so I always find that that's really important because I didn't realize how much self-defense was actually around setting boundaries and knowing where your line is. So, why safety is a big stressor for women, and we're going to get more into this as I go into more of the slides and more of what I do. But really, we live in a fear-induced state of violence, harassment, and just in general unsafe environments that contributes to chronic stress in women. Also, 80% of women, 80% of the autoimmune diseases are on women. And I think a lot of it's because we live in this hypervigilant state that we're always put in. We're given this list of rules at a very young age that we have to follow to stay safe. Some of them is, carry keys between your fingers, buy a weapon, buy pepper spray, don't dress in a what's considered provocative way. They don't really tell us what that is until after the assault happens, and then they say whether they feel. And when I say they, I mean just society in general. There's an expectation that we as women have to handle the choices that are made for us and against us. 1 in 3 women have been subjected to physical and sexual violence, according to the World Health Organization. According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, 2 out of 3 women won't report a sexual assault. So really what we see is almost every woman that in this room around us and the women that we know have faced some type of harassment or assaults. This one can be a little bit triggering, but according to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, 975 out of every 1,000 perpetrators of sexual assault will walk free. And I put this graphic on so that it's just a visual reminder of how little the criminal justice system does to find justice for victims of sexual assaults. Now, the way that this 1,000 breaks down is out of that 1,000 sexual assaults, 310 of those are going to be reported to police, which means 690 never see the light of a police station and a report is never filed. Out of those 310, the police are only going to investigate around 40 or around 50, and that's going to lead to an arrest. So we're talking about hundreds by this point that don't even get to lead to an arrest. Out of that 50, prosecutors are going to choose to prosecute around 28 cases that will lead to a felony conviction. Most of them are pled out, or the prosecutor won't take the case at all. And then 25 of those perpetrators will actually be incarcerated. The 3 between 25 and 28 is either the case gets dismissed on a technicality or they have some type of mental illness that allows them to go to a mental institution instead of incarceration. Now, according to the Department of Justice, the average adolescent who begins sexually assaulting in his teens without treatment will go on to commit 380 sex crimes in his lifetime. That's approximately 370,500 potential victims for each one of these 975 that walk out free. Now, to exasperate what we as women are up against further, there are 84,765 rape incidences per 100,000 people in the United States. This statistic is the reason I started Pretty Hands, Hard Punches, is because I realized that as women, we are not just up against the societal indoctrination of we just have to be more safe. We're up against systemic abuse that has been happening for years and years and years that we have been indoctrinated just to believe we either deserve or we don't deserve any type of justice. And the fact that 690 people that are assaulted don't even go to the police, don't even file a report, says that there's a lot of bias within our criminal justice system, which is one of the reasons I'm going back to school to get a degree in criminology, because I need to learn how to advocate for the victims inside the criminal justice system, not just teaching them how to avoid being one of these statistics. Does anyone have any questions? I know it's a lot. Nope, we're good. Okay. So the link between stress and safety, now that you understand kind of the statistics of what we are up against, we live in a constant state of fear and anxiety, and that affects our body. That fight, flight, freeze, or fawn is a survival mechanism that helps us stay safe and live through whatever ordeal we come in contact with. But it also creates a hypervigilance that leads often to burnout, fatigue, and emotional stress. And that is where the nervous system comes into play, and why I pay so much attention to everything that Akari's talking about when she's talking about the nervous system, because I myself suffer from two autoimmune diseases. And I believe that a lot of that is because of the trauma that I endured through the abusive situations that I had found myself in my early adolescence into early adulthood. So the psychological shift of self-defense is about taking you out of that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn and understanding the confidence in your ability to protect yourself, so that you don't run through the world scared and in fear. You just are aware of what can happen, so you look out for what could happen. You understand the situational awareness, and you start setting boundaries in your life. It's not going to be the creepy man in the van that's going to attack you, even though that's what we're often taught. It's going to be the person that you know, oftentimes that you trust, that is waiting for their opportunity. And that's why it's so important. And I've learned that boundaries are, in fact, a girl's best friend, not diamonds. So, why boundaries at work feel so hard? And I put this in here because I know that we're all business owners, we're all out in the professional world, and it can feel almost overwhelming to try to set any type of boundary within the workplace. And I experienced this myself. But a lot of it is because we are raised that to believe that in order to be a good woman, we have to self-sacrifice. We have to put everyone ahead of us so that we can be considered strong and nurturing and a good wife and a good mother and a good woman in general. We have the internalized conditioning. Being nice. How many people here have ever gotten onto the elevator when they felt uncomfortable because they want to be nice? I have. From a survival aspect, you're literally getting into a steel box with a predator in order to be nice. And that's terrifying when you start thinking about the statistics that go along with how many people are assaulted in not just the everyday world, but also in elevators specifically. We often avoid the conflict to keep the peace. We say yes when we want to say no, and we tolerate discomfort to keep other people comfortable. And the problem is when we do that, we become much more vulnerable to abuse because it's easier to cross our lines. So, and then when we do try to set boundaries, we are considered the bad guy. We're considered the one that is being over dramatic, too much, too emotional. But the truth is that there's an emotional cost to not setting boundaries. And actually, Akari talks about it much better than I do and about what it does to your body. So I'll let you jump in as soon as I'm done, real quick, Akari, and just give a quick on what that does because you say it so much better than I do. But when you're taught that your value is in being needed, not being whole, and not setting your boundaries, then it becomes easy for people to take advantage of that. And you're guilted into the silence instead of supported into speaking up. And you see that even in that statistic where it talks about 690 women don't report. It's not that they don't go into the police station, it's that they are talked out of reporting because they don't receive support for speaking up. They get guilted into silence or feared into silence. Love is, you're taught that love is overextending, overgiving, and overexplaining. But the reality is, love for yourself is understanding where your line is. So oftentimes, setting a boundary will feel like betrayal, not just to yourself, but to the people around you. And Akari, do you want to jump in real quick and just talk about maybe really quickly what that emotional cost is of setting those boundaries?
Of not setting them or of setting
Not
them?
setting boundaries.
Okay, when we don't set boundaries and when we're uncomfortable with not setting them, what ends up happening is that your body keeps the score. And so just like Ely was saying, we tend to not trust our gut and we end up in situations that are going to hurt us more than they're going to benefit us. So the boundaries are not they're not like personal in a way that you're trying to hurt someone. The boundaries are meant to protect you. And when you look at boundaries like the gate in your property versus the other person's property is just to protect your peace.
Thank you. I knew you were going to say it better than I could. Yeah, that's why down here I have body awareness and boundaries equals confidence that commands respect. Because the moment that you start recognizing those uncomfortable feelings and you can put language and a name to them, you start setting the boundaries so you don't feel that. And that turns into confidence. Some of the basic techniques that you can use when somebody does actually step over in your physical boundaries. And I added this in here just so people could see it really quick, but it's really just parts of your body. So often as women, we are sold the idea that if you just buy a knife, buy a gun, buy pepper spray, buy the little cat ears that you put on your keychain, that you're going to be safe. And what that actually does is give us a false confidence of safety. Because if you're not trained in those weapons, you have a 99.6% chance of failing in using that weapon as a self-defense tool. As a matter of fact, according to the Harvard Journal of Injury study, it says that only 0.04% of women are effective using a weapon in a self-defense situation. And a lot of that reason is because you're not just having to use a weapon, you're having to use a weapon that most likely you've never trained with in a high adrenaline, fear-induced state. And that is incredibly hard to do even when you have trained. Some of the ways that you can use your body as self-defense so you're not reliant on a weapon is your hands, palms, knees, fists, fingers, and elbows. I didn't take that picture, so it's not on there, but I always make sure I mention it. 68% of women who used physical resistance prevented sexual assaults, according to the Empowerment Self-Defense Model. In 2018, 68%, which is the vast majority. So if you understand how to use physical resistance, you have a likelihood of actually presenting or preventing the sexual assault without escalating the situation. And then where to hit. If we're already at a physical altercation, we're at a physical disadvantage. You got to go for the soft spots, the eyes, the throat, the nose, the Adam's apple, the solar plexus, the knees, and the growing. And just remember that with high adrenaline and anger, sometimes kicking to the growing isn't enough. You do have to go for something like the eyes. If he can't see you, he can't chase you. If he can't breathe, he can't chase you. If his nose is broken and his eyes are watering and he's in a lot of pain, most likely he's not going to be able to chase you. So just keep that in mind when people are trying to sell you these random weapons that are glittery and look really pretty, because most likely they're not going to work. You need to learn how to be the weapon yourself. So I am going to go back to some of the boundaries and looking for those red flags and green flags in relationships. And these are universal for every type of relationship you're going to find yourself in any type of situation, including your business, personal, professional, family, friendships. Some of the red flags to look for in your body is your stomach dropping, you feel tension in your shoulders or your jaw, you flinch. I used to flinch all the time when my boss would yell at me. And I never really understood why I did because this dude was really short and I totally could have beat him up. But I would flinch all the time. And I didn't understand that it was because I didn't like the way that he was treating me. And he was crossing a boundary I wasn't aware of. Also, you cross your arm, you try to make yourself smaller, avoid eye contact. You feel like you're performing, not really participating. When you leave a situation and you felt like you weren't able to speak freely, but you were performing in order to get some type of approval or to people please, which is the next bullet point, that's when you start to realize, hey, maybe something this isn't normal. And like I say at the top, when you're stuck in a survival mode, that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, the dysfunction is what feels normal. Real healthy boundaries and communication feels like dysfunction itself because you're not used to having that. When you do, it looks more like you speak freely, you're relaxed, you're safe sharing difference of opinions, even arguing. You feel like you can take up space, you can ask questions and hold your ground, and you trust what the person that you're speaking to, their actions will match their words. You feel valued in what I have your and who you are, not what you're producing for the people. And these are some of the ones that really help you start to recognize in your body. And can anyone think of any other red flags or green flags to throw in on this? Usually, people have like a couple of different ideas.
I think red flags are, well, the eye contact is for sure. I think that makes me really nervous when someone won't look at me. Um, let's see. I can't really think of any. You have a lot of options here.
It's because I add to it every time I do one of these.
You're getting information for your slides.
I am, like people, when we start having these conversations, they're like, hey, is this a red flag or is this a green flag? And then I'll put it on. I'll be like, oh, yeah, no, that's a red flag. Like the feeling like you're performing, not participating. That actually came from a former student of mine who said that with an instructor that took advantage of her, she always felt like she
Mm,
was very performative. She couldn't be herself.
that's good. I like that.
Right. Does anyone have any questions on this one? All right, let's move on. So, boundaries are really what you do when you start recognizing these feelings of uncomfortability, these red flags. You start feeling that feeling in your gut or your shoulders or your tension in your jaw. One of the things that we are taught is that boundaries are something like a punishment or they're a wall. And that they're not, right? They're not a wall to shut people out. They're not a sign that you're selfish or being difficult. They're not something that you ever have to over explain. And they're not only reserved for conflict, violence, or toxic situations. A lot of times people make a boundary reactively. You did something I don't like. This is my boundary. But the reality is you have to actually make your boundaries preemptively. You have to show up knowing where your line is so you become aware when somebody starts to cross it. And if you don't, the people around you will set that line for you. They'll set the boundary for you. And then they'll make you feel like you're in the wrong for trying to say, hey, I don't like being treated that way. I don't want to do that. When you try to backtrack, that's how they play that. And my therapist did the best visual for me. She said that you and everyone in your life is in a cycle. Your sister, your mom, your husband, your friends, you're all in a cycle. And when you start setting boundaries, you get out of that cycle. And everyone else is still comfortable with where they're at. But now you're setting boundaries and you're making their life harder. You're making it harder for them to make you do what they want you to do. And so they start to question you. Why have you changed? What happened to you? You're not the friend I had. You're not the daughter. You're not the mother. You're not the sister. What happened? And that makes you second guess yourself. So always remember that boundaries are your best form of self-respect. They're the tool that you use to protect your peace, your time, and your focus. They are what help you create clear communication for what you will and will not allow in your life. At the end of the day, a boundary is simply a line. It's a line that you draw that say, this is what I do allow, this is what I don't allow, and this is what I can be flexible on. And when you go in knowing that, it becomes a leadership skill, not a weakness somebody can use to try to control you or gaslight you. And finally, it's a way to really build that trust with yourself and with others. We often treat boundaries like they're a luxury in our life. But in order to live a happy and fulfilled life, we need to set boundaries for every aspect. Just like with a budget, we have financial boundaries. We know where everything goes in which bucket. We also need that for our time, our professional, our mental and emotional space, our budget, our friendship, our social, right? And our physical boundaries. But so often we get hung up on just the physical boundaries. We forget that we are allowed to set boundaries for everything in our life. And that's why when we start to question ourselves, when you start to feel like we're wrong, we go to what our boundaries really are, which is a form of self-respect for us. Does anyone have any questions on boundaries?
No,
I know I'm talking a lot about them.
I think you did a great job. There's so much more to boundaries that we don't always see.
Yeah, I mean, I really thought when I started this women's self-defense business that I was gonna like come into a room with you ladies and I was gonna be like, here's how you hit a dude in his throat, right? Like, here's how you get away. And then when I started to delve into what women really needed, I realized that so often by men, we are taught, here's how you hit him in the throat. We're not taught how to recognize a man that will put us in a place where we have to hit them in the throat. We're not taught how to recognize, and it all comes back to boundaries. That's why I always say boundaries are a girl's best friend, because when you start knowing that, you start not allowing those types of people in your life.
I think the
So
hardest
how
piece
do
is
we
when you
start?
when I think the
I'm
hardest
sorry, go
piece is
ahead.
what the hardest piece is when, you know, you're not picking up on these red flags because that is your normal.
It's your normal, and you have been taught to make it your fault. He's only upset because I made him upset. If
Mm.
only I was a better wife, if only I was a better mother, if only I was a better girlfriend, if only I was a better woman, then I wouldn't be treated this way. And so we really are taught to step back and criticize ourselves and internally blame ourselves, right? Which really messes with our nervous system. Ha, see what I did there, Kari? But in reality, it does really mess with us because we start to second guess. And the way relationships get abusive is that it starts with those small crossings of the
Hmm.
boundaries, those small
Hmm.
violations. And once someone can get you dependent on their opinion for your self-worth, they can gaslight you into doing anything they want. Because when they do hit you, you're not going to ask, why would this man who says he loves me hit me? You're going to ask, what did I do to deserve to be hit?
Mm.
And the moment you start asking that, they get to answer that question for you. And that's where the cycle of abuse gets so much harder for us to leave. So, how do we set these boundaries, right? I just talked about it's all reactive and we're emotionally in the moment. If I don't want to be treated this way, well, we start by taking a moment, taking a breath, and building the ideal version of ourselves. Really asking ourselves these 5 questions. And I had to do this for myself when I was developing how I wanted to show up in the world as a better person. And the first question you ask yourself is, what does the ideal version of me look like? Take a moment to really visualize what she looks like. Does she wear makeup? Is she a stiletto person? Is she a summer dress person? Is she just a, band t-shirt and jeans type of person? Is she a yoga pants person, which is what I'm wearing right now? What does she look like? And once you have that visual in your mind, you ask, what does she feel like? How does she wake up every day? How does she go to work every day? How is she excited to wake up and live life? And is she, nurturing herself? Is she happy to go to work? Is she happy to be around her friends and her family? How does she how does she feel? And then the next one you're going to ask is, what are her boundaries? So you don't set them as a reaction to something someone did. You preemptively set them to how you want to be treated. And this is where it changes from I don't like to be treated this way to I don't allow people to treat me this way. And that change in your mindset is really what changes the dynamic of how you view yourself. And it gives you the confidence to move on to the next one, which is how does she handle her boundaries being disrespected? Before I started this, I would get really upset. I would hold it all in and I would keep it bottled down as far as I could. And then I would explode, screaming, yelling, crying, in my mother-in-law's face, screaming at her, right? Because she was so many times stepping over my boundaries that I didn't even know that I needed to have. And now I just say no. She doesn't like it. Oh well. Knows a full sentence. I don't explain myself. I don't over explain. And that's because when I have the ideal version of me, which is the person that I'm living right now with the pink blazer, right? That is the ideal version of me in summer dresses when I'm not working. I don't need to over explain myself. I'm confident with who I am. And building this ideal version of you step by step creates that confidence for you also. And that leads to the final question of who does she allow in her life? And that's a hard one because you will find as you start setting boundaries and you have that cycle and you're stepping out of that cycle, that the people that say they love you the most are going to be the people that push the hardest to keep you the same. And there's going to be people you have to step away from. You have to love from afar. Maybe you can't have the same relationship because they won't respect this new ideal version of you that you are building. And that's where anchoring in your why of why you are doing this becomes less about trying to explain the difference of behavior to other people and understanding it in your heart and your soul of who you are. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm curious to see if anyone has done anything like this, any practice like this.
I mean, I kind of made it up on the fly when I was building my curriculum. This is what I did. The day that I quit smoking on December 3rd, 2020, I sat outside and I actually worked these questions on a notepad of like I had to ask myself, how do I want to show up as a woman, as a mother, and as a wife? I didn't like what I saw when I looked in the mirror. What I saw was a very weak woman that I knew in that moment something had to change. My son was never going to grow up and see the woman I saw in the mirror that day, ever. And so these are the 5 questions. I asked myself a lot more, but I realized that these were the 5 that was really going to build that foundation of how do I set these boundaries and not get so overly complicated and overwhelmed and emotional. How do I make this change without ruining every relationship in my life? And this was how I did it. And I walked away from a lot of people. I mean, I walked away from my best friend that we just had different ideologies and we had different parenting styles. And it was much easier to excuse her behavior before I became a mother. When I became a mother, it became much harder. And so for me, it was really, I'm going to build this. And I never even planned on teaching it to other women. I just did it myself. So I actually don't know if anybody really has. I'm sure they have similar things, but I don't think anything building the ideal version is, I think it's something fairly unique to me.
Valerie,
But
you had a question?
Yeah, yes, I have done boundaries with Tiffany with highly perceptive people, which are on the outside, and you build a boundary without emotion all around you. I'm a yes for honor and respect. I'm gonna ask for being honored and respect
Yeah,
all around in in the fate and the upbringing plan. And then I'm a no for being abused. That's it.
good. Yeah, that's important, especially the people that are caretaking around you. You need to make sure that you keep those boundaries and write anything down so that you can, inform any of us of any abuse that's happening.
That way
Yeah, absolutely.
you don't have to explain anything because then it's protecting you. They don't even understand what's going on.
Yeah, no, it's not about over explaining or having to do that, but just making sure that you are writing these things down for yourself so that if anything ever happens again, that you have something documented.
Mhm,
Yeah, that's an internal thing. Thank you.
mhm.
Thank you. So, once you've developed the ideal version of you, how do you start to reclaim yourself? And so, I scoured through all of my notes as I began building this, and I came up with a few things that you can start right now, this very moment, to really reclaim yourself and start building that ideal version of you, right? And it's moving your body, touching grass. I think we've all heard it before, right? But reconnecting with your strengths, giving yourself grace and time to understand where you thrive at, right? Speak the truth you have been holding back. I often will tell my students to write a letter. Write a letter and burn it if you don't want to keep it around, but write yourself a letter and grieve the version of you that tolerated too much. Give yourself that closure because so often as we begin setting boundaries and we start to get empowered, we will look back and we'll start to feel shame of the things that we allowed in our life. We'll feel the guilt and the shame and the blame and the internal blame. And we have to use that as a way to just move forward. Acknowledge it, speak the truth, but also, and if you need to grieve, grieve that version, and then realize that you know how to say no clearly, calmly, and without apology now, and understand where you decided, where you allowed that type of tolerance, and recognize you will never allow it again. That's when you start to allow yourself to surround yourself with people who value you as a person, not what you can do for them. And then when this is actually one I got from you, Akari. Ask yourself, what do I actually want? And I put this in after I saw Akari speak at a networking event. And she had said, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And up until that point, I had said yes to a lot of things to kind of people please and things I had to do. And I had to ask myself, what do I actually want? And now, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no for pretty much everything in my life. And that helps me choose the peace over approval every single time, right? Because if it's not a hell yes, it's a no, where I'm not seeking other people's approval to give me my self-worth and value. And I spent a lot of my early adolescence into early adulthood really trying to earn that gold star from the people in my life that I admired. And now I don't explain my boundaries. I stopped explaining my boundaries. And you have to remember that it doesn't matter how many times you explain these boundaries to people who don't want to understand them. You could write it in rock and throw it through their window, and they still wouldn't understand it because they don't want to. It is much easier for someone to pretend they don't understand why you have the boundary and continue to question than it is for them to look internally as to why they simply can't respect you. And I had to learn that the hard way. And now that's one of the reasons I have it in here several times. No is a full sentence, and you don't have to explain. Create the habits that protect your energy, not just your time, and walk into every room as that ideal version of you who knows that you belong and what you want. When you do these types of things, and it's not going to be something you do overnight, by the way, this isn't going to be something you sit down and then tomorrow you're like, I got it, right? I'm the ideal version of me. But it is something that you can build step by step. And every step that you build, you become more confident with yourself. And it becomes easier to say no. And it becomes easier to deal with the uncomfortability of making other people uncomfortable. You no longer feel like you have to self-sacrifice yourself in favor of keeping everyone else happy. And here are a few power phrases that I actually want everyone to say with me as we go through them. I think that it is very empowering. The first thing we go over is it's not what you say. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So everyone sit straight up, shoulders back, chin up, a little bit of stubbornness in us. And we are going to keep our voice calm and grounded. Now, here's 3 ways to say no and not just say no. Ready? Everyone say, that doesn't work for me.
That doesn't work for me.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
I'm not available for that.
I'm not available for that.
These 3 ways of saying no really are universal for almost anything you don't want to do. When you need space, you can say something like, I need time to think before I respond.
I need time to think before I respond. Ooh, that one's good.
That one's my favorite. I use it all the time. I'm taking a break to protect my peace.
I'm taking a break to protect my peace.
I'm not ready to talk about that yet.
I'm not ready to talk about that yet.
Ironically, I kind of use the I'm not ready to talk about that with my 8-year-old son all the time because I'm teaching him how to apologize, and that when you apologize, it's not about you feeling better, it's about what you did to hurt somebody. So you need to wait for them to be okay with your apology. And so I added that in there because a lot of times when somebody does something wrong to us, they want themselves to feel better and they will almost demand that you talk to them about it. And so having that in your arsenal of I'm just not ready to talk about it can help give you the time to figure out how you want to proceed with it, not force you into a corner to have to react to the way they want you to receive their apology. The next one is when someone crosses a line, please don't speak to me that way.
Please don't speak to me that way.
That's not something I'm okay with.
That's not something I'm okay with.
I'm ending this conversation now.
I am ending this conversation now.
A lot of times with the very dramatic friends that I had, I call them now emotional vampires. They would tend to keep the conversation going. I would try to end it, and then we would talk a little bit about something else, and they would pull it back in, pull it back in, pull it back in. My mother-in-law does this to me all the time, by the way, because she's a saleswoman. And I have to tell her, I'm going to end the conversation. Don't bring it up again. And she'll respect it now, but it took like a year. It took a year of me being like, that's not something I'm okay with. I'm going to end this conversation right now. Don't speak to me that way. I'm not ready to talk about it. So just keep in mind that these are not like one size stops everything, but they are things that you can practice and you can use in your everyday life in order to start feeling more confident about setting these boundaries. And the last one, which I actually think is the most important, is about honoring yourself. The first one is I don't have to explain my no.
I don't have to explain my no.
I can love someone and still choose myself.
I can love someone and still choose myself.
I deserve to be treated with respect.
I deserve to be treated with respect.
These ones are very important because so often our self-talk plays such a big role in our confidence. And when we have so many people around us that are used to being able to treat us and talk to us however they want, we forget to talk to ourselves in a way that is uplifting and empowering. And we end up talking to ourselves in their voice. And so anytime you're feeling down or you're questioning yourself, come back to this screen, take a picture if you need to, and continue to say, I deserve to be treated with respect. Knowing that you can love someone from afar is one of the strongest things that we as women can understand, because a lot of times we give all of ourselves to people, and then when they don't give it back, we feel rejected. We feel unloved, and that makes us unlove ourselves. And so understanding I'm choosing myself and I'm choosing to love you from afar, and saying that out loud gives yourself the confidence to be able to continue to move forward. Always remember that your voice matters, not just what you say and how, but how you say it. So use it when you need it. Any questions?
No, I love these power phrases.
Now, how does that play a role in actual self-defense? You know, we've gone a little bit over the physical self-defense, but what's the difference between women's self-defense and just going over to Chad the Muscle Man and learning some jujitsu for a half an hour and feeling like you're empowered? Well, it's the system that I teach. It's the think, yell, run, fight, tell method, which was developed by women in the National Women's Martial Arts Federation over 50 years ago. All black belts in various forms of martial arts that realized we as women were missing something when it came to self-defense. And what it is the overall concept of personal protection. Number one is think. That is your situational awareness, your intuition, your attitude, right? Trusting your gut, trusting your instincts, having the confidence not to get in the steel closed elevator box with the creepy man and not worrying that you look rude. Understanding what is going on around you. One of the things I tell, especially women that are professionals that are really busy, and all the teenage girls I teach, is when you're in public, head up, phone down. Put the phone away. And I make this
Mhm.
mistake too. So I say it with no judgment, ladies. But head up, phone down. Know what is going on in your area. When you know what is going on in your area, when you know what's happening in every situation you walk into, you walk in with confidence. And your language, tone, and posture, just like in the last slide, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. That plays a role in whether or not you are selected to be victimized in many of the cases. Like I have on here, 63% of women who yelled prevented a sexual assault. So one of the things that I don't have it written on here, but I'm going to walk through it really quick, is there's a study where they went in, the organizers of the study, and they interviewed 1,000 convicted rapists. And all they did was have them watch videos of women walking. And they asked them to choose which women they would attack. And all of them chose the same women. They chose the women who looked like they would be compliant. And what I mean by that is they were distracted, they were alone, and they looked meek. Their shoulders were hunched, their chin was down, their eyes were down, because predators at their core are cowards. They're not looking for someone who's going to fight back. They're looking for an easy target, someone who they feel will be compliant enough to get them to a second location so that they can assault them however they want to. And that's why it's so important to have that confidence in your walk, in your language, your tone, and your posture. There is a big difference between, no, I don't think I really want to do that. Can we not? Maybe. And I'm not interested. No, thank you. Now, I may sound a little bitchy, don't get me wrong, but that's because we're not used to women sounding assertive. And all I'm doing is changing the influx of my voice to be an assertive voice instead of a meek voice. And that changes the dynamic of the conversation that this predator may or may not be having with you in choosing whether he's going to attack you or not. Run is assessing that risk and escaping the danger. When you have that situational awareness, you have the confidence, language, tone, and posture, and you know where your escapes are, you are 81% more likely to get away because you're going to know where you're running away to. You're going to know where safety is. And that's why understanding those surroundings is so important for us as women, right? Being distracted, walking in high heels, in the pencil skirts, which I've done, having our phone, having the headphones on, there is something to be said about some of the ways that we are taught to stay safe. I just don't like the implication that if we do these things and we're attacked, then somehow it's our fault. And a lot of the rules that are implemented on us and that are pushed on us, like don't wear headphones, don't run at night, put your keys between your finger, don't park in a parking garage. I could go, at one point I made a list of 112 of the different rules that women are told on how to stay safe. But the reality is in our judicial system, those rules are really meant for society to be able to blame us for what happens to us. Well, why were you dressed like that? How much did you have to drink? Why would you go running at night? Everyone knows women shouldn't be running alone at night. But it doesn't take away the fact that somebody else made a decision to hurt you, to hurt us as women. And that's why these are so important. That's why it's so important to have that situational awareness, because the judicial system doesn't protect you. The police department is not coming to protect you. They're coming to investigate a crime. And if they don't believe that you're the victim of that crime, they're definitely not going to help you. They're going to help themselves investigate the crime. And that's it. The prosecutor, as you looked at the statistics earlier, they're not there to give a victim justice. They are there to keep their conviction rate up. So if they don't feel like a victim is going to be believable enough, what we call in the industry a perfect victim, they're not going to take the case. And so that person's going to be out there attacking more people. That's why when we go to fight, which is number 4, not number 1, it's more about escaping the danger and less about trying to kill your attacker. Because killing your attacker depends on it being considered self-defense. And it's only considered self-defense if the police department and the prosecutor believe you're the victim. If they don't believe you're the victim, it's assault. And there is nuances depending on the jurisdiction, whether it's a sheriff that shows up, whether it's the police department, and whether it's a federal crime or whether it's a state crime, a county crime, or a city crime. And I didn't know any of this until I started doing criminology. And it's kind of terrifying. That's why I'm teaching the way that I do. Escape the danger, but don't put yourself in a dangerous situation to get called that it's not self-defense, it's an attack. Finally, after we've learned the basics, the most important part of all of this is finding help for yourself, support or an advocate, so that you don't go into this criminal justice system alone. Because I went into it alone at 22 years old, having fought for my life. And the police department told me that I was the attacker and that I was going to go to jail. And I had no advocate and I had no understanding of the criminal justice system. But because my abuser was more hurt than I was, and it was considered a domestic dispute because we lived together, the police department told me that I would be going to jail for assault with a deadly weapon because I was trained in martial arts. And my abuser and attacker would go to the hospital because he was more injured than me. So if something happens to you or somebody you love, the time to find out what to do is before anything happens, so that you understand what we are truly up against as victims. I know I just talked a lot and it was a lot of information, slightly triggering, but does anyone have any questions?
No,
No?
I think we're more shocked that, being the victim can be turned on us so easily and put us at risk for, being the abusers.
One of the things to keep in mind is, actually, there's 2 things. One is called secondary victimization, and it is how the police department, the criminal justice system, the hospital, how the people that you go to when you are victimized handle the victimization. And if they handle it in a way that is re-traumatizing, that is called secondary victimization. And the second thing to truly understand is that we're taught that everyone finds justice, right? Like we see some of the things happening, but when you look at the social media, when you look at the statistics, you realize that very few women even talk about what happened to them. Very few women ever come forward. And if you are not considered the perfect victim, then you're not going to be one of the people that the justice system decides to try to give justice to. And even if you are the perfect victim, or what somebody else would consider a perfect victim, the defense is going to tear up every aspect of your life. They're going to
Mm.
ask who you slept with. They're going to ask what you were wearing. They're going to ask how much you had to drink last night, which is why so many women don't come forward, because they know that they're going to go through a secondary and even a third victimization. And the likelihood of that person being convicted is very low. On top of that, on top of them, even when they do get convicted, on average, they get less than 3 to 5 years. Most of the time, they get suspended probation. That's it.
That's awful.
Yeah,
Ugh.
I know it's a lot, ladies. But when you know how to protect yourself, you can live less and with less fear and more freedom. And the reason I put this on here is because sometimes it can feel like we don't have a lot of options, but the reality is we do have a lot. Most of the time, these abusers are not just reoffending, but they understand who to look for. And if we become less like the vulnerabilities they're looking for, we are much less likely to be attacked. And unfortunately, that means somebody else may. And that becomes hard. And that becomes something that we have to live with. And the reason I put you live with less fear and more freedom is because somebody else's choices are never on you. We can't do that as women. We can't absorb that. And we will often start to feel that way. And the moment that we do, we become more vulnerable to abuse.
Mhm.
That's my one. So thank you. I do have a free safety e-guide that goes over a lot of what I went over today. The promo code is Wild Women, if you want to scan. And I am offering the 21 Days to Unbreakable. I have a $50 off coupon that has launched. So if you want to learn this stuff more in depth, even some physical things that you can practice at home, feel free to sign up. I created a community, a very supportive one for any women who really want to learn that online women's self-defense training.
This is so in depth. It's a lot of information that you've put in here. Does anyone have any questions about anything? Do you want to stop the share, hun?
Oh yeah, let me figure out. Stop
There
sharing.
we go.
There
I
we go.
just had
Sorry.
more of a comment in it, just from, I mean, this is very, very well done, Alicia.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. But I just remember at some point someone said to me, and then I've heard that this was a Maya Angelou quote, but the shortened version is when somebody shows you who you are, who they are, believe them. Because I know I hear so often people saying, "Oh, he didn't really mean that." It's like, yeah, he really did.
It
And I
wasn't
know
just a
I've been
joke.
that person myself. Yeah, exactly. And I think that was one of the things that really turned things around for me, to be able to get out of situations that weren't good for me.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Stephanie. I think that we have a lot of those experiences and we don't talk about them nearly enough so that we create awareness for other women to learn from because, sometimes we don't learn any of these things at home. Valerie, you have a question?
Yeah, an observation. Recently, because I have to use a cane, and I'm afraid of falling, looking down, and comes down that way. And I thought at first, I said, I know that's to protect me, but I feel very vulnerable during that.
What are you doing to lower, the danger, so I know for a fact that you're not going out at night, right?
Right, I'm not.
Good. Is there any way that someone can come with you, accompany you, any of your church friends, so that you're not alone?
No, I'm going to go to Freedom Park for lunch. And today I went to the Pride Management to give them my check.
Uh-huh.
But before I start walking, I do look around.
Yeah.
And I
And
have
that's
And I have a thing that if I pull it, it makes a big loud noise. And it's always available to me.
Good.
But if they get me from behind,
Yeah, but I think that you have that spatial awareness, to make sure that you're looking around and like Ely was saying is having that awareness and looking around and making sure you're looking. I mean, that
I
is
understand that, but I can't do that when I'm looking down.
no, no, no. But before you get up, that
Mhm.
you're looking to make sure. I think that gives everyone an opportunity to see that you're aware of what is around you, and that is going to help. But also not carrying a bag, right? Or carrying something that you could like a smaller bag that you can just put on your body.
I,
Like,
I, I have a little one that has all my information in it. I also carry a bag with my medicines.
well, do you need to be carrying the bag with your medicines?
Yeah, because I have to take it after I eat.
Okay. Well, I think one of the biggest comebacks are fanny packs. Fanny
Have
packs are back. I do too. So I have a fanny pack, and that's where I put all my things, and I put it in and I cross it this way, or I'm carrying it in my hand because I can hit someone.
Also, Valerie, one of the things that you can do is start practicing really being in tune with your body with the situational awareness. So, a lot of times our mind will comprehend things that our eyes don't see or we don't recognize, but our body will react. We'll get really uncomfortable. The hair on the back of our neck will stand up. We'll feel like we need to run. And those are things that you can start to really build the skill set for, since you are on a cane and it is going to be a little bit harder for to have your head up the whole time, is really start recognizing those feelings in your stomach. If you get an uncomfortable feeling in your stomach, even feeling nauseous is another one that will hit. And that's your body reacting to something they sense in terms of danger. As humans, we are inundated with survival instincts. Now,
Mhm.
as women, we're taught to push down those survival instincts in favor of being polite and nice, and rebuilding them and bringing them back out is a skill set that we all have to work on and rebuild that, remove that indoctrination. And so when you're walking and maybe you stop and you look around for a moment, take feeling into what your body is saying, because your body may be reacting to something. And if you can learn to recognize that, you're going to be more safe than anyone who doesn't have to walk on a cane that doesn't know how to do that.
What a great point. I think that is great. She's I think that's a great point. We underestimate the heart has a uh energetic, you know, piece that goes 3 to 5 feet outside of your body. And so you connect. And so it's the heart that recognizes that someone's near you and it
Yeah.
lets the brain know.
And so often, I'll bring up the elevator example and I'll ask women, like, what did you feel before you got into the elevator?
Hmm.
And if you read a book called The Gift of Fear by Gavin D. Becker, I think I quoted him in there. It talks about women who survived like horrific things and it goes through their stories. So it may be triggering, but every single woman who's ever experienced any type of assault, violence, abuse, they almost all will say, I felt something was off beforehand. My stomach felt off, the hair on the back of my neck. And the women who get into the elevator, whether they're assaulted or not, will all say something felt off. And we don't really know how to give words to that because we're so quick to dismiss it. Oh, I don't want to be dramatic. Oh, I don't want to overreact. I don't want to be rude. But if we don't dismiss it and we take a moment, we will realize that that's actually our survival instinct saying,
Hmm.
hey, no, don't do that. That's not a good idea. But one of the things that society has taught us is, oh, disregard that. And it makes us so much more vulnerable. And I think, honestly, it's kind of done on purpose. Like, they want women to be more vulnerable. They don't want us to be able to fight back. Like, society as a whole doesn't want that. That's
Yeah,
why
well,
they made all of them. Yeah, go ahead.
creates a self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Makes us question
Easier to control
ourselves.
when you do it yourself and not what's happening to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Ely. I think that this is such an important topic that needs to be talked about in so many different levels, especially like Valerie was commenting, she's carrying a cane, so her mobility is challenged. And that bodily awareness, I think, really hits home because we don't tap into that enough. And we all have it. We all really do have it. And it's important to, just bring that conversation around what are we feeling and what do we notice is coming up for us and how can we tap into that, very important piece of who we are innately. Like you said, it's like part of our survival.
Hmm.
And how can we use that to empower us to get out of situations that are not meant for us? Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that
And when you're
I
thinking about self-defense too, I would say, just kind of like in your class when you did this, you were talking about the different phases of life women go through. And I think that that plays a role also in self-defense. Me with rheumatoid arthritis, I don't have the same movement I did as a 20-year-old woman. I have to adapt. And I think as women, as we age, as we go through these different times in life, it's really about learning what works. Maybe the fist punch doesn't work for you, but the eye gouge might. And practicing those that may work for you and not feeling like, oh, if I can't do all of it, I can't do any of it. Learn what can work for you. A cane can be an incredible weapon. Your fingers going into eyeballs, incredible weapon. Grabbing the Adam's apple and yanking it right behind the Adam's apple, it is the hyoid bone. So if you break that, they die.
oh,
So this is self-defense. And then don't talk to the police, call a lawyer.
I love it. Valerie, what do you have to say?
This is what this is what I get.
Oh, so it's like a fanny pack.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, that is good. Okay, I thought you were carrying one of those like mom bags where
no.
Like the one behind me.
yeah, I
I
always,
do I do carry a bag, but this because I have to take the medicines.
yeah, but
And
that's
then,
good.
and then my water.
Yeah, I see women who carry those big bags with their kitchen sink and their king size bed in it. They're walking around like this. Well, thank you so much, Ely, for coming and talking to us. And I'm going to share this with the community because I think this is definitely something important that needs to be shared with everyone, even the women that weren't, who thought weren't really interested. This is a lot of good information that they need. Um, in 2 weeks, oh yes, Stephanie, please go ahead.
Are you available for speaking events?
I am, yes.
Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'll
Made
have
my
all. I know she's like, yay. I'll send you all of her information so that you can connect with her in the replay. And also in the next 2 weeks, we have another conversation that we have not had that I think I find very fascinating. We're going to be talking about when alcohol abuse starts to invade our lives and we need to do something about it. I am not sure what the title is because I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to really look through it. But her name is Angela Johnson. She lives in Greece. She moved from the States to Greece. So she's joining us from such a beautiful place in the world. And she's a nurse. She's a nurse who has turned into a coach for alcohol abuse. I believe that she lost her brother to it, and so she's very committed to helping women who are struggling with their coping mechanisms and have turned into, leaned into alcohol as a support system versus actually connection, which a lot of trauma is the lack of connection and the lack of safety. So back to your presentation, Ely, that's one of the things that women really need after any type of assault is we need to feel safe and we need to feel connected. And so these group environments really are so helpful for that. And I'm definitely here for it. So if we don't have any other questions, I will see you ladies in 2 weeks. Stephanie, I will see you on Friday. Ely, I will see you next Tuesday. And Valerie, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a fantastic evening, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.